As a longtime fan of the franchise, the updates seen in Mass Effect Legendary Edition are, to put it simply, amazing. So much has been touched up from the original, such as small details on character models to massive reworks of certain NPCs, and that's all on top of 4K textures, a plethora of visual effects, and of course, more lens flares. This is our performance review of Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Let me start by saying that the entire game does an incredible job taking the destinations we've all become accustomed to, and with 4K AI upscaling, BioWare has already done a lot to wow us as we return to those destinations. The Xbox Series X does an excellent job maintaining 60 FPS in quality mode, with very subtle dips only when assets move in. The PS5 does have some lurches here and there, but for the most part it does just fine holding 60 frames per second. Though I'm not sure why the PlayStation 5 seems to be having an issue here. It didn't pop up very often in my testing, but when it did, it was quite significant at times. The frame rate mode is also included, but I don't think you'd want to dip down your base resolution to 1440p on PS5, but on the Series X the frame rate mode makes more sense. At 1440p you can push all the way up to 120 frames per second, but it doesn't really hold that 120 frames per second that well. The 120 FPS mode is not stable in most locations of the original Mass Effect. Even when standing completely still, it struggles to hit that target in locations like the Citadel. Here, it will dip to around 80 or 90 frames per second when there are a lot of characters on screen, like in the Citadel here, or the Noveria battle, which has always been a poorly optimized area. Once you get to Mass Effect 2 or even Mass Effect 3, however, it gets much closer to that 120 frames per second target, if this is a desirable option for you. As the Mass Effect franchise is so narrative heavy, I personally was completely happy playing at native 4K 60 frames per second for the entirety of my adventure. Now, if you've played this series as many times as I have, you're going to notice the dramatic improvement right away when you start going into planets or just returning to old destinations. Putting any shot side by side, there might be a few shots that you almost prefer the original designs with. One in the opening, for example, that I really liked in the original was the hazy effect around the Mass Effect relays. It's a real cool way to convey this harnessed power that's almost too intense to keep at bay, but it's just too hard to pass up those upgraded visuals across the board. Speaking of details, the amount of care given to each of the character models is greatly appreciated, especially the default female Shepard who has been added to the first game alongside a robust character creator if you'd rather design your own look. The update includes details on characters' outfits like the belt buckles on Tali or textures on all of your armors. Some have been quite drastically changed in a good way. And one of the first areas I wanted to see was Noveria's loading bay, as it was always one that stood out on the 360 as rough around the edges. Texture popping and frame rates would cave during the opening moments. Sure enough, it was incredibly smooth on my Series X playthrough. This extends to almost all areas I've looked at, but on the PS5 I stuck to the introductory moments. So yes, there's ambient occlusion everywhere, and that does a lot to add depth to each scene, but the main thing that really jumps out to you is the liberal usage of screen space reflections that are immediately showcased as soon as you boot up Mass Effect 1, and then you see them again in the water in Eden Prime. Even in the Normandy or on the Citadel, you'll see reflections on the floor that are using this tech. It's a nice touch, but it sort of jitters a little bit, and in some cases, as you swipe across the screen, you're going to notice it. Hopefully this is an issue that can be easily fixed in the future with a patch, because it actually looks really great. Otherwise, all the improvements are extraordinary, from the loading times across the board to the updated controls in the original, which updates the HUD, which allows you to use all weapons regardless of class, and updates the shooting so that things are more precise, giving you an indication when you hit somebody in the head, for example. And even the Mako, which is still the Mako, has a few improvements like the boost and the fact that you don't instantly die when hitting lava. Overall, both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X versions of Mass Effect Legendary Edition are an incredible treat and love letter to Mass Effect fans everywhere. Having the option to play at 60 FPS even on the Series S console is also truly a treat. If you've been waiting to play Mass Effect, this is the version you should play, period, and I hope more people will discover why I love this series as much as I do. Hey, thank you so much for watching, and for more on Mass Effect, keep it right here at IGN.